Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives What If Edition. And today we're going to be discussing episode 2 of Marvel's What If. What if T'Challa were a Star-Lord? Now, odds are if you're watching this, you know the stories of T'Challa and Star-Lord. How T'Challa was the Prince of Wakanda, but he wound up taking up the mantle of King after his father's death, as well as the title of the Black Panther, as that's typically the king, and the Black Panther is the protector of Wakanda. For Star-Lord, his real name was Peter Quill, and when he was a child, after the death of his mother, he was abducted by a group of intergalactic space pirates called the Ravagers, and rather than the Ravagers turning him over to his father, Ego, who wanted to use him for his plans to conquer the universe, the head of the Ravagers took Peter in and pretty much raised him until Peter grew up to become an intergalactic outlaw himself that took with the name Star-Lord, eventually going on to form the Guardians of the Galaxy with a group of other misfits and outlaws. The stories are both very intricate and interesting, but both of them are fairly separate from each other, not really having much interaction. However, let's rewind a bit. In the original story of Star-Lord, Yondu himself was one of the people that went in and got Peter, so he knew exactly who they were looking for. But what if, when the Ravagers were hired to find Peter, Yondu didn't want to do it? No. What if instead he decided to have his idiot crew do the job? And that's where this episode comes in. In this reality, T'Challa, as a kid, was very adventurous. He wanted to go out and see the world, but his father said, "No, I've seen it, and they're just dumb idiots that want war. We're better off here. We're safe here." But T'Challa, being an eager child, didn't really believe in that and wanted to go out and see the world. So one night he went out to the outskirts of Wakanda, just having fun moving around until he accidentally found a beacon left by the Ravagers. And at that point, that's when two of Yondu's crew in their own ship came down and, well, they grabbed T'Challa thinking he was Peter. And of course, once they brought him back, Yondu, of course, read them the riot act, because they even told him, "Does this look like the same kid?" And when I first heard about this episode, I kept thinking to myself, okay, so they grabbed T'Challa when they're after Peter. Are they just idiots? And this episode, and yeah, the opening pretty much said, yeah, they're fucking idiots. Like, Taserface, who's the only background Ravager whose name I remember, openly admits that he thinks all humans look alike, to which I respond with, "What the hell are you smoking? Peter and T'Challa do not look anything alike." And before you say, well, he's an alien. Aliens don't know what humans are like. Have you seen all the beings out there in the universe? A lot of them look very similar to humans, but with slight changes. You wouldn't think that they would look at Earth and think, wow, the Earth seems to have a lot of different kinds of humans. They wouldn't notice the difference? Especially the most obvious thing. Peter's white, T'Challa's black. There's kind of hard to mix them up right there. It's hilarious, but it's hilarious because they're just so stupid. However, rather than Yondu immediately bringing T'Challa back, T'Challa is actually interested in everything that he's seeing. He thinks it all looks really cool. So Yondu takes an interest in him and asks, "What do you want?" So Yondu's like, "What do you want?" It's like, "I want to see..." Yondu asks him, "What do you want out of life?" And T'Challa says, "I want to see the world." And Yondu says, "Sounds fun. How about the universe?" And from there, Yondu pretty much took T'Challa in the same way that he took Peter in the main timeline. However, while in the main timeline, Yondu pretty much just taught Peter everything he knew about being an outlaw and eventually led to Peter forming his own identity as an outlaw. In this reality, T'Challa actually had more of an influence on Yondu and the Ravagers. In fact, during his time with the Ravagers, hold on a second. Sorry about that dog. Anyway, like I was saying, T'Challa was actually having more of an influence on Yondu, to the point where, while T'Challa did become this timeline Star-Lord, in this world, he made Star-Lord into kind of into pretty much an intergalactic Robin Hood, and with the Ravagers as his merry men. Essentially, he eventually led the Ravagers down a different path where they actually began, and as they say, just stealing from the rich, giving to the poor. To the point where, by the time this episode begins and we open up with the familiar scene of Star-Lord on Morag there to get the Power Stone, he's not there to steal it because there's a reward on it or that there's some kind of bounty on it. No, he's stealing it because he thinks that the power from the stone could power entire star systems or heal a dying sun, etc. While he does still run into the guards that are working for Ronan the Accuser, the head guard, whose name I do not remember, I'm so sorry, rather than not knowing who the hell he was, immediately recognizes him and just starts fanboying. It's hilarious. He's like, oh my god, do you know this guy? This is Star-Lord, and great intergalactic bounty hunter, steals from the rich, gives to the poor. And like, T'Challa is obviously like, oh yeah, that's me. It's nice to meet a fan. And he's like, he immediately starts sucking up, saying, hey, can I join you? And T'Challa's like, no, we don't have any openings. And but he realizes, well, we still gotta fight. My boss kind of wants that thing, but it's just super funny. And they do get into a fight, and T'Challa overpowers him. And even as he falls to the ground unconscious, the guy's like, classic Star-Lord. Like, it's just hilarious. So, T'Challa ends up taking care of the other two guards with him, but he decides, we could use some more hands. So he grabs the guy anyway, goes outside, and when confronted with the army, rather than having to fight it off himself, Yondu's there as backup and uses that little arrow thing that he has connected to that thing on his head and kills them all. As such, T'Challa, Yondu, and this guy, again, I still don't remember his name, I'm sorry, end up taking the Ravager's ship and heading to an intergalactic bar. And so of course they're trading stories. Everyone's just like, and the guy's still fangasming over T'Challa and how awesome he is. But one particular story he asks is, well, how'd you deal with Thanos? With the conversation with Thanos? And guess what? The Mad Titan walks up, wearing a red jacket with the Ravager symbol embroidered on the breast. Yep, in this reality, T'Challa took Thanos down not by fighting him, but by talking with him. They essentially got into a blow for blow of their words, and T'Challa won the argument and convinced Thanos there are better ways to redistribute the universe's wealth. So Thanos is no longer bent on genocidal domination, though he still claims that it would have been an efficient method because it was random and all that stuff. Though everyone still calls it genocide, it's just a running gag. Pretty much in this reality, T'Challa thinks it's just having he's had a better influence to the point where, because Thanos is not the Mad Titan anymore, there's things that he was directly responsible for, like the death of Drax's family. That never happened. In fact, in this reality, T'Challa actually runs into Drax because he's manning the bar that he's at, and Drax wants to take a photo with him, and Drax is just as subtle as he is in the main timeline. However, in the middle of this, we end up meeting this universe's Nebula, and it turns out that she's not only the head of this bar, but she's not a warrior. I mean, don't get me wrong, she probably still is an adept warrior, but she has not had the level of she didn't have the level of cybernetic implants that her main timeline counterpart had. As we see that she still has her hair, which she's blonde, who knew? She's now wearing a full-length dress, kind of what you would expect from a bar owner, and while she still has her cybernetics, it's only over her left eye, and even then, because of how she grows out her hair, that eye is usually mostly covered. And yeah, she and Thanos are not exactly seeing eye to eye, no pun intended, because of his past as a Mad Titan. But that really is not much of an issue. T'Challa shows Nebula that he got the Power Stone, but Nebula tells him that she's already got another job for him. In this case, it's for something called, I think I know, I wrote it down, sorry. I wrote it down, I'm so sorry, I should have had this on standby. The Embers of Genesis. Essentially, these are like little strands or seeds or whatever that all you need is just like a small amount of seeds, like maybe this much, and if you plant it on a planet, the whole planet will be terraformed. And with the amount that they're going after, they could pretty much regrow an entire solar system from a few barren rocks. But unfortunately, there's a reason why Nebula is hiring T'Challa and the Ravagers. In this case, it's because of who has them. The Collector. So yeah, you remember the Collector in the main timeline, how he liked to just collect stuff and have this great collection? Well, he still has that in this universe, but in here, he's gotten a lot more powerful. You see, with Thanos going straight, it left a power vacuum in the universe. One that the Collector immediately filled up. And with that fill-up, he's gotten a greater collection, gotten access to greater resources, and because he's become such a big threat, the Dark Order, who in the main timeline served Thanos, now act as his personal bodyguard. So yeah, case in point, this is not going to be an easy job. To the point where even Yondu wants to back out because the guy has too much sway and influence. However, T'Challa does talk Yondu into it because, well, they're the Ravagers. They do this. They've before, like in his own words, they've just been picking pockets. Now they can rob the bank and redistribute the wealth evenly. And so Yondu just kind of caves in. It's like, okay, fine, because yeah, T'Challa's his boy. And something I should probably mention though, because this is important later. Earlier in the episode, when T'Challa was talking with Nebula, Nebula did ask him, why didn't he ever go back to Earth? Because with his resources, he could easily go back to Earth. And T'Challa states that's because there's so much to do out in the universe, but he did actually try to go back once. That Yondu did want to bring him back, but Yondu claimed that when he went back to Earth, Wakanda was just gone, vaporized, destroyed in some senseless war. So T'Challa just thinks that there's nothing to go back to. Of course he's going to stay out here in space. So, of course, that adds a level of tragedy to his backstory. But of course, there's still something more to that. But we'll go back. But again, I'm only mentioning that because it's plot important for later. Anyway, so yeah, pretty much the group realizes that it's not going to be easy to get into the Collector's Vault. So from here, the episode turns into a heist movie, and a kind of amusing one at that. Essentially, what they're going to do is that Nebula and Yondu are going to go into the Collector's Vault and offer him the Power Stone. Because, again, Infinity Stone. Very, very powerful. Of course, they're going to bring it in a giant case that T'Challa will be in, but when they go in, of course, they'll let T'Challa escape, and he'll look around looking for the Embers of Genesis. Hold on. Again, I'm going to check it out because I knew I was going to forget. Yeah, the Embers of Genesis. But, of course, they're still going to have some problems. Like, there's going to be a scanner, so, of course, the rest of the Ravagers are going to be outside causing a distraction, which is actually kind of amusing because Thanos is actually legitimately beating the new guy up. Again, I do not remember his name, and I am so sorry for that because apparently there are people that really like him, so I'm sorry. Sorry, but because I think he called him... I don't remember, but it was insulting. I think it had the Emperor of Genocide. I don't remember. I really don't, because it was kind of a backhanded insult. So, but yeah, with the distraction, the Dark Order, of course, didn't see the results of the scan of their plans, so it allowed Nebula to free T'Challa and allowed him to escape and look through the Collector's Vault, while Nebula and Yondu went up to the Collector with the Power Stone to try and bargain, since Nebula does have a debt with the Collector. As such, at first, things seem to be going rather smoothly. The Ravagers are causing a scene outside, getting the Dark Order's attention. The negotiations are going well on the inside. But T'Challa, of course, is having problems. As, like I said, in this timeline, the Collector has amassed more power, which means his collection's even larger. So finding the Embers of Genesis is going to be kind of hard to do. However, he does get a guide in the form of Howard the Duck, which admittedly his role is short because while T'Challa lets him out so he can show him where the embers are, Howard immediately is just dropped from the episode. But it's kind of cute seeing them actually interact and talk. But unfortunately, things go south rather fast as the Dark Order immediately knocks out everyone outside, and they recognize the Ravagers and realize, oh shit, this is a trap. As such, they put everything on lockdown, and as everything is going into lockdown, Nebula pulls a stunner on Yondu, and yeah, turns out it's double cross. However, with T'Challa, as the lockdown is going on, he ends up managing to make it into one of the Collector's vaults where he houses a bunch of ships. But while he's walking through, his necklace, which he kept from when his time in Wakanda, begins to glow. He becomes curious as to what's going on. He wonders what's going on, and one of the ships begins to glow along with it, and it turns out it's Wakandan. As such, he goes inside, and of course, all the positions are filled with statues dressed in Wakandan garb. But as he walks around, his bracelet ends up reacting to all the technology, and a hologram of his father appears. And I'm not going to repeat exactly what his father says because I don't remember what it was. But put simply, This ship was sent out into space as a beacon. They know that aliens took T'Challa, but they don't know where he is. And pretty much the message is saying, if you find this beacon and you find my son, activate the beacon and we'll find you. And T'Challa, if you're seeing this, and he even has a message for T'Challa where he says, if you're seeing this, son, please come home. We're waiting for you. And when T'Challa sees this, he looks really pissed, which is about the time that the guards show up. As such, T'Challa is thrown into the same cell as the Ravagers, and immediately when he gets inside, he's pissed at Yondu. He punches him, throws him into the gate, and even says, "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you lie to me?" And Yondu tells him, "I did it for your own good. You're like me. You're an explorer, and all your past does is just hold you back like a cage. You wanted to explore. I gave you that chance." It's it's still a rather douchey thing to do, but ultimately, it doesn't really get to go any further because the guards come back in and say they want T'Challa. They knock him out, and it turns out that what Nebula promised the Collector was that she'd deliver T'Challa. So they pretty much just get him in the cage, and T'Challa ends up yelling at the Collector about how in his world that people don't take kindly to having others get put in cages. The Collector just kind of scoffs him off because, well, why would? Because, whatever, he's just a human, no special powers. So he pretty much tells that gangly guy from Infinity War, the one that Tony called Squidward, and says, "I want you to dissect him and find out and just look and find anything you can and just find out what's inside him." But back with the Ravagers, it turns out Nebula comes back with another guard, and as that guy that worked for Ronan yells at her and says, "He trusted you," and yada yada yada, she immediately pulls a blaster and shoots the other guard. And as with every heist movie, there's a twist. It turns out that Nebula was honest with T'Challa right from the start, that this was all a trap and that the Collector wanted him. So pretty much she devised this whole plan to not only settle her debt with the Collector, but to also get the Embers of Genesis. The whole thing with the spaceship, that was an accident. She did not know about the Wakandan ship. But pretty much, they got what they needed, but they pretty much asked, well, how's T'Challa going to escape? Well, remember the necklace? Well, that's still Wakandan, and if you remember well, they happen to specialize in one of the strongest forms of metal in the known universe. Yeah, he used it to break it. He pretty much turns it into a brass knuckle and smashes his way out of the cage. Unfortunately, the guy that was going to do the dissection captures him before he can escape, but the Collector's servant, that girl whose name I do not remember, inspired by what T'Challa said about people not being about getting out of cages, turns on that guy and kills him and lets T'Challa go free. Unfortunately, in T'Challa's escape, he runs into the Collector, and it turns out that the Collector, and so he and the Collector end up fighting. And it turns out the Collector has amassed a lot more weapons from this, especially from Earth. We see that there is a lot of weapons from some of the bigger name superheroes, including as we even see Captain America's shield. But he also has gotten dark elf weaponry, as he has a blade from the Dark Elves. And to make matters worse, he's got Hela's helmet, which he can use to summon her necromancer blades. So case in point, T'Challa's not really winning this time. And add on to that, as the Ravagers are escaping, more of the Dark Order chases after them, and so Thanos stays behind to fight them, which does admittedly lead to a cool fight, but unfortunately, it's two of the Dark Order against Thanos, and while he may be strong, he does not have any Infinity Stones to back him up this time, so he's not going to be winning this. However, salvation does come for T'Challa and Thanos, as they do end up getting, as they both end up getting aid. T'Challa from Yondu, who came in to help him fight off the Collector, and Thanos from Nebula, who saw him selflessly sacrifice himself, so she did give him the benefit of the doubt, and together they were able to take down the two remaining members of the Dark Order, with Nebula and throwing in a handful of, a little bit of seeds from the Embers of Genesis into the big guy's mouth, causing him to pretty much explode in vines, which begins coating the entirety of nowhere, where the Collector's hideout is. In the meantime, T'Challa and Yondu do manage to trap the Collector in one of his own cases and pretty much leave him to the mercy of his collection, because his servant ends up releasing everybody that he's captured. And so Yondu and T'Challa manage to escape, or managed to escape by taking the Wakandan ship and meeting back up with the Ravagers. Of course, and what I like is that Yondu also grabbed like a dog. I think it's a Marvel. I know it's a Marvel character, but I don't remember his name. But it was a dog in a spacesuit. And so T'Challa pretty much wonders, he doesn't really know where his place is now, because now that he knows that Wakanda's still around, he's done a lot of stuff as Star-Lord, so where does he belong? And Yondu pretty much tells him, I pretty much have raised you to belong anywhere. Wherever you go, that's where you'll belong. It's all a matter of what you choose to do. And T'Challa decides, you know what, maybe I do want to see home. And so T'Challa meets back up with the Ravagers, and they return to Earth, specifically Wakanda. And once they arrive, of course, they are met with open arms. Well, T'Challa goes to meet with his father, and it's just a happy and they're just all happy as they give each other a hug. And T'Challa introduces his family to the Ravagers, which is all really nice. Smiles, happiness, hugs. It's all really nice, especially as we see Thanos talking to. I really did forget her name. I'm not good with names. I'm sorry. So you see that lady who is the head of the Wakandan Royal Guard, and apparently Thanos once again told her his plan to kill half the universe, and she said, "I think that's genocide." But of course, T'Challa's father is like, well, wait, how did you get him? And of course, Yondu was going to tell him the truth, but T'Challa's like, no, I was lost. He just happened to find me. It's all really nice and smiles, and it's just sweet to see everyone getting together and T'Challa kind of embracing both sides of his family. But, of course, with all this going on, it does make you wonder, what happened to Peter Quill? If he didn't become Star-Lord, what happened to him? Well, the episode ends with him working at a Dairy Queen, and as he's cleaning up, mopping up the floors, and just kind of dancing to his music as he is wont to do, someone comes walking in, and he's like, I'm sorry, we're closed. And we see that it's Ego, who is there to say to him, what, don't have any time for your dad? And yeah, with the Watcher's narration, it's clear that this is he's there to recruit him for his stupid unification plan, which might be another episode later, maybe not, I don't know, but yeah, this, even if we don't know what happens later, it's a good bet that this universe is probably screwed. So overall, what I think of this episode, it is a lot of fun. And in my opinion, I think it's a vast improvement over the last one. Now, don't get me wrong. The Captain Carter episode was not a bad episode. I legitimately think it's still a good episode and works on its own standards. But one big problem with the Captain Carter episode was that it was trying to condense a 2-hour-plus movie into 33 minutes. And while it did still keep the essential parts from Captain America the First Avenger in its story, because of the condensed nature, it felt very rushed, and the whole story just kind of flew right by. But for this episode, while it still definitely had a similar pacing, it did not feel rushed. It was because unlike with the Captain Carter episode, it was telling a mostly original story. It pretty much just took the premise and then went in a new direction with it, showing a universe where things went differently because the Ravagers just happened to grab the wrong kid, and just how much this kid had an influence. He changed the Ravagers, turned them from intergalactic criminals into a peacekeeping group. Well, not really a peacekeeping group, but yeah, like the Merry Men to his Robin Hood. They still steal stuff, but like they said, they steal from the rich and give to those less fortunate. They take great treasures and use them to power entire star systems. Give people a chance to fight back. Hell, the whole reason they're breaking into the Collector's vault in the first place was to get the Embers of Genesis, because they could be used to regrow entire dead planets. It's actually it's just, it shows the vast difference between their characters. Like, for Peter was at his heart a good man. He was a good person who just happened to be a dick. So, and like I said, in the main timeline, Yondu had more influence over him, had an impact on him, which again they do show that there is still They do show kind of that father-son relationship in this timeline. But in this reality, it's the reverse. It's kind of the reverse. T'Challa has more of an influence on Yondu, and Yondu not only teaches him the trade of being an intergalactic bounty hunter, but T'Challa's morals, because he was raised in Wakanda and did have the chance to know both his parents, plus the fact that his mother wasn't dying of cancer because his dad was a dick. They still allowed it. It shows that he still was able to form a vast amount of values, of that honor, of that desire to do good, and he carried that with him when he became Star-Lord. That he used these ideals and forged a new identity for Star-Lord, one beyond even what Peter could in the main timeline. And I'm not knocking Peter Quill in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He's awesome. He's fun. He's an idiot and a dork, but he's just fun and awesome to watch. But T'Challa clearly goes in a different direction with that. And seeing the influence he has is just really impressive. And it's essentially the butterfly effect. From this one change, we see more changes, and they're all so interesting. Because T'Challa was Star-Lord, he was able to talk down Thanos before he even began his quest for power. And so, because he was able to talk him down, Thanos joined their party, but yes, it's still Josh Brolin playing Thanos, so that's fun. But because of that, it had an impact on his relationships. We see that because he wasn't so hell-bent on conquering and killing anymore, he didn't push Nebula to gain as much of the enhancements as she did, to the point where the only enhancements that we ever see from her are around her eye. Beyond that, she looks to be rather healthy, mostly herself. It's actually rather nice. But again, we also see the negative side of that, as because Thanos wasn't in power, it left a vacuum, which allowed the Collector to get into a higher to become the big bad of the galaxy and continue make his collection grow even bigger, even getting the Dark Order, who previously served Thanos, to become his personal bodyguards. It's all so interesting, and shit like that is why I love alternate realities. It's not just about seeing what's the same, but how things are different because of that. And just seeing the ripple effect and how things are altered. Seeing people in similar but different paths, or on entirely different paths. It's so interesting, and the universe they set up in this story does a really great job of showing off how it's similar and what's different. Sometimes through subtle ways, like when we see that Drax is a bartender and that his family is still alive, to much larger ways, like with Thanos, who is a main character in this entire episode, and showing that he's no longer the mad titan who wants to conquer the universe because he thinks that the universe is just overpopulated. It's just really nice and so really interesting and cool. And on top of that, the story itself is good. Again, while the pacing is similar to that of the last episode, you don't notice it as much in this one because it's, again, a wholly original story. They're not skipping chunks. It's still told in a relatively straightforward fashion with the pacing, actually, with the story matching the pacing. So nothing feels rushed, like you're just being thrown in and that just one thing passes by one after the other. No, in this case, we have talks between the characters. We see T'Challa and his connection with Yondu in this timeline. And when T'Challa does learn that he was lied to by Yondu, it definitely does feel like a big dramatic moment. When T'Challa is pissed at Yondu, it definitely works, and it's a nice little moment between them. Like, actually finding a way to replicate the Star-Lord Yondu relationship on the main timeline, but working it around T'Challa how T'Challa and Yondu's relationship works in this timeline. And while I do believe that T'Challa probably forgave Yondu a little too easily, you could also make the argument that he's been through enough with Yondu to know that Yondu would never do anything to intentionally hurt him, despite the fact that he lied about what happened to Wakanda, which it's proven because while T'Challa's getting his ass kicked by the Collector, he knows that Yondu will be there to save him, and guess what? Yondu does show up, and they work together to take him down. It's really nice stuff, and the themes presented throughout this about home being defined, and just kind of the definition of what makes you who you are. It's all really nice. Like, we see that T'Challa, despite his new environment, still has a kind soul and does want to do good. But when he learns the truth, he ultimately wonders where his place is, and Yondu tells him, "Your place is everywhere. It's just a matter of where you want to go." And it's actually really nice because he finally chooses he wants to go home, but he doesn't give up all the friends and family he's made along the way. Same goes with Thanos. It's actually really interesting to see him in this alternate timeline acting as the good guy. And of course, and just kind of and even seeing him seeing him and Nebula try and patch things up, I do feel like that does happen a little fast, but at the same time, actions speak louder than words, and the fact that he's willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of the Ravagers probably did make Nebula realize, okay, he's probably not the bastard who was an abusive dick to me when I was growing up. So I like that. I guess the only real flip side of that is because Thanos didn't become as big a conqueror as he did in the main timeline, that he never invaded Gamora's planet and thus adopted her. So she's not around in this timeline, unfortunately. But again, the relationship between Thanos and Nebula in this episode is really nice, and of course the performances are still all really good. In this case, I think almost every actor from the MCU films reprises their role in this, from Josh Brolin as Thanos to Chadewick Boseman, of course, as T'Challa, giving his last performance in the MCU before his unfortunate passing. And yes, they even got Kurt. What was his name? I forgot his name. I know it. Hold on. Kurt Russell. It was Kurt Russell. I knew it was Kurt something. I just forgot his last name. Yeah, he reprises his role as Ego in this movie, and that's just kind of nice. Everybody turns in fantastic performances, and for Chadewick Boseman's final performance in the MCU, he does a fantastic job as T'Challa, just as he did in the main films. I think it's just perfect, beautiful, and of course, the action is still nice. Because it's in space, we still got a lot of really creative and unique designs for the places they go, for the collection in this timeline, for the designs of the Ravagers. The fight scenes are still really damn fantastic. It's just, overall, this episode, I think, is really damn good and helps continue to showcase why What If is probably one of my favorite comics of all time, and why this series is still, I think, worthy of attention. It's not just retellings of the original stories, but with some slight differences. It's completely new stories with certain similarities to the world you know. And in my opinion, that is the beauty of alternate realities. And after this episode, I'm even more excited to see where they go and What If, and what other possibilities they explore. So yeah, on the whole, this was a fantastic episode. Just all around amazing. So, yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. Sorry I'm sweaty. It's really hot here. But I will see you next week when we talk about episode 3 of Marvel's What If. So, till then, hope you enjoy yourself, and, yeah, take care. See ya.